All right, welcome back. We continue live. Bob Pompeani along with Andrew Fillipponi, and we do a podcast together. Another one is coming up on Friday, so make sure you tune into that one. And I thought it was fun to have Jim Nantz on our first one, Andrew. It was a good time, and he took us to areas that I didn't think he might. And the Arnold Palmer story was one that I had never heard before. How about you?
Yeah, same. I would ask him a question now about Tony Romo. Bob, his Super Bowl performance, there was a little bit of an issue there, a snafu. You catch my drift.
Yes.
But I don't know if he would really want to touch that one. But that's what we try to do. We like to make people feel comfortable, but at the same time, we like to get them off the beaten path and give them some curveball questions, Bob.
All right, we got people want to talk about Penguins. Let's get to them. Bill and Allison Park, you're first. Go ahead, Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, Bob, looking good tonight.
Thanks, Bill.
Hey, I got a question. How does Mike Sullivan go from be the head coach from the Penguins to the QB coach for the Steelers?
He cloned himself. That's the obvious answer, right? So thank you very much for the call. Mike Sullivan is an interesting dynamic in this because he's a coach who obviously is going to be inherited by Hextall and Brian Burke. I have no idea. I heard Hextall today said that he's never met him, but he's admired his work. But you always, as a head coach, I would imagine, Andrew, have got to say, okay, now the guy who hired me is gone, and now I'm dealing with two people who I've never dealt with before.
Right. I mean, both of these guys, Burke and Hextall, you know, when Ron Hextall took over in Philadelphia, he inherited Craig Berube, and he fired him, and he brought in David Hackstall. And when you look back on that move, Craig Berube, Bob, what has he done since? He's won a Stanley Cup, as it turns out, in St. Louis. So, you know, yeah, that's the way it works here. It's a little bit different, though, because Sullivan has won 2 Stanley Cups. He also has an ironclad contract that is going to pay him a lot of money if they try to part company with him after this year. And I just wonder, with the economic situation we're all in, if the Penguins would be willing to pay Mike Sullivan for a couple of years to go coach for somebody else, because he'd get scooped up in a second. The Penguins obviously now, Bob, are spending a lot of money. I didn't know they had it. You know, they created a position for Brian Burke. It didn't exist, and it couldn't have come cheaply. Brian Burke's not a guy that, you know, works for peanuts. He's probably making at least $1 million. So it's interesting. Hey, good for them. You want to get talented people and smart people to run your hockey organization. But it's just interesting. So many teams now are downsizing. They're getting rid of scouts. They're getting rid of coaches. And here come the Penguins, and they shelled out big bucks not only for a GM, but they created a whole new position, Bob, too.
Yep. And I admire that, actually, because they're trying to continue to, you know, move this franchise forward. And 4 years is what we hear on Ron Hextall. It can't be cheap either. So these guys are spending money to try to get back to where they are. Now, the question I find interesting is, what are they going to do this year, Andrew? It's not like they can go out if they truly intend not to trade any of their key core people. Then what do they do? How do they bring in people? Unless you pull off things like Jim Rutherford did by getting Trevor Daley, doing things that you didn't think would turn out, you know, the Justin Schultz move, even the John Marino 5th and 6th round draft picks, that kind of stuff. What do they do to change the dynamic if they feel they need to do it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. But you always ask good questions, Bob, so I shouldn't be surprised. Look, I think what they'll probably do is they'll make a lot of hockey trades. So by that I mean, you know, you look at guys with similar contracts. You know, might be you've got a surplus. You take away, you know, somebody out of your defense core. You trade them for someone to fit into your bottom 6 that fits the new identity of the team that you're trying to form. I would be shocked if the Penguins traded their 2022 first-round pick here in the next month. It just doesn't seem like that's something that Ron Hextall would even consider. Young players in their pipeline, pooling. I would be floored if they did that. You know, I would almost feel, Bob, like the goaltending situation they have. I wouldn't be surprised if they're stuck with that. Again, unless it's a deal where you're kind of swapping the same money. You know, a $3 million player leaves and a $3 million player comes in. Something like that. You know, it's going to be so interesting, too. You hit on it with Sullivan. You know, Mike Sullivan is used to having a big say in these personnel moves. Is he going to have the same voice? Right. I mean, you've already got, you know, Burke and Hextall are going to have to debate things. Now you've got a third guy in Sullivan. I would almost think, based on what I heard today, that when it comes to the roster moves, he's going to be squeezed out a little bit, Bob. That's how I took it. How about you?
Well, here's the other thing. If you remember, Rutherford and Sullivan didn't necessarily see eye to eye on some of the acquisitions they made, like
True.
Ryan Reeves. He was one of them, and Sullivan never warmed up to him.
Yep.
Ian Cole was another one. People wondered why he isn't playing. These are guys brought in by Rutherford and yes, Sullivan.
Yep.
Now, if it's not Rutherford, if it's a new management group, if he doesn't want to play certain guys that he feels may not fit and they feel do fit, I mean, that could be interesting as well. So the other thing I would say to you, Andrew, is that the Penguins waited on Pierre-Olivier Joseph, and I understood why. Young kid, they didn't want, but he proved that he could dive right into the deep end and swim, like any champion swimmer. And so the question then becomes, a guy like Nathan Lagaré, a guy like Samuel Poulin, I know people will tell you, well, they're still not ready. How do we really know? Maybe an injection of young guys into this lineup, and I realize people say, well, they're not top six. If they don't have a top six, you can't play them. Who knows what could happen? You inject some youth, you may be surprised.
I disagree with that whole idea, that when you look at the roster right now, who in the bottom six, look, now we're going to see Bluger, Tanev, and Zach Aston-Reese back together, Bob. Maybe those three guys will click. Who knows? They have in the past.
Good chemistry,
But when it comes to, they did. But when it comes to the Penguins Stanley Cup teams, it was an infusion of youth. It was getting a shot in the arm from the guys that Mike Sullivan had coached in the minor leagues. And I think he's kind of, I wouldn't say soured on those guys, but I don't think the same trust and loyalty would be there with the young players because he didn't have a connection from coaching them in the minor leagues. And so I think that Sullivan has been too prone in the last couple of years to lean on veterans and not trust the young player.
Let's go to William on line 2. Joins us right now. Well, actually, William's gone, so we'll go to Chuck in Crafton. Hey, Chuck, what's up?
Hi, Chuck.
Yeah, Bob, Chuck Boozer. Hey, curious, if Nutting sold the parts, what is the value of that franchise, out of curiosity?
It's over $1 billion, 1.2, almost $3 billion.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
And it's a far climb from where he actually bought it. So he's making money even when he doesn't make money.
Yeah, I know he gets that, $50 million a year for player development and all that other nonsense.
Hey, listen, the bottom line is this is what I think ails baseball. It's an underlying problem, Andrew. Nutting bought that franchise, and he's a good businessman. There's no doubt. $92 million turns out to be $1.3 billion, and they haven't won all that much. Just imagine if they did. But we've talked a lot about, baseball getting back at it now, and there's, they're talking about 7-inning doubleheaders, all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that never is brought up is this salary discrepancy. And we've seen it bigger this year than maybe ever in terms of what the Dodgers and Padres have done in the offseason and what a lot of teams haven't even tried to do.
Yeah, well, baseball, they don't care about us here in Pittsburgh. They think that the meal ticket, the real way for them to generate revenue and make money is if the Dodgers and Yankees and the Red Sox and Cubs, and those are the teams that are in the playoffs and in the World Series every year, that it's those markets with those fan bases that are generating the eyeballs and are generating the dollars. And so, towns like ours, we exist really, Bob, to play the Cardinals 19 times and the Cubs 19 times. That's really it. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but that's just how I feel. I've seen no evidence to the contrary that baseball wants an even playing field for teams like the Pirates and the Royals and the Brewers to have an equal shot of winning like the Dodgers. I don't think they feel like that's good for their bottom line or their business model, sadly enough.
Well, it can't be good for everyone involved, like these cities. You can add Baltimore, now even Cleveland to it. It's not good for business. I don't care what they say. It should be done fairly, equitably.
Yeah, but if you're going from $90 million to $1.1 billion, I bet Bob Nutting's going to tell you that it is good for business.
And it takes
not good for
some
competitive
owners
balance.
to gather together these guys and say, look, we got to take a break here, but look, we're not going to stand for this anymore. You come to our place, we are not going to lay down, but we need an even and equitable system, and we'll talk more about that when we come back, including our Tri-State Office Furniture tweet of the night. That's all coming up. We're a little behind here. We'll get to it next right here live on Pittsburgh CW.